cities, towns, and rural counties across America. A day when citizens get to chart a course for the future and choose which candidate they want to lead the way. Most of the polls have already opened and voting has just started in Idaho and California, and in Washington State, Alaska, and Hawaii. The polls will open over the next 2 hours. So welcome to a brand new hour of America's Newsroom. I'm Dana Perino.
You're doing there, Election Day. Here we go, right?
Yes, here we go.
Lovely pink.
Thanks. It's pink. Exclamation point.
Morning to you. I'm Bill Hemmer. Good morning at home. Decision day as voters cast their ballots. Some of you might be in line right now. We'll be here with you every step of the way. And here is what some voters around the country are thinking about as the sun came up this morning. Check this out.
I think the price of everything has gone up dramatically over the last 4 years, and I think if we get the price of fuel and oil down, that's really going to start to help.
I'd like to have a commander-in-chief that our allies respect and a commander-in-chief that our enemies respect and fear.
The cost of goods has really gone through the roof.
We need to close that border, and we need to close it right away.
We want to afford a home. Interest rates too high, inflation's crushed our dollar.
The economy, the inflation, groceries, everything's too expensive.
There's so many people out there that are, thinking about their kids, thinking about their friends, their family, and what our future is going to look like.
Fox Team Election Day coverage. Mark Meredith in Washington, where Vice President Harris will be waiting for the results. Bill Melugin starting us off, though, in West Palm Beach, Florida. Hi, Bill.
Hey, Dana, good morning to you. We are inside of a rec center here in Palm Beach where we expect former President Trump to vote later on this morning, and he had himself a big night last night. He picked up a late endorsement from podcaster Joe Rogan. He's got 18 million subscribers on YouTube. He also had multiple campaign rallies, including what may have been his last rally ever. Take a look. This was the scene in Grand Rapids, Michigan last night, a midnight rally that stretched into the early morning hours. This is the same spot where he finished his 2020 and 2016 campaigns, as Trump is a very superstitious man, wanted to wrap it up here in 2024 again. He made his final pitch to voters while he was in Grand Rapids last night and talked about the long road it's been. Take a listen.
As I said in the very beginning, this isn't my campaign. This is your campaign. This is a great campaign now it's 9 years, and we've been fighting side by side every step of the way. We've been together.
Meanwhile, Trump's running mate, Senator J.D. Vance, voted in Ohio earlier this morning. This video shot just a short time ago. The senator has also been crisscrossing the country, hitting battleground states just like the former president. And Vance says he is feeling confident today. Take a listen.
We do expect to win, but obviously no matter who wins, half the country, as you said, is going to be at least partially disappointed. I think my attitude is the best way to heal the rift in the country is to try to govern the country as well as we can, create as much prosperity as we can for the American people, and remind our fellow Americans that we are all fundamentally on the same team, however we voted.
And the Trump campaign tells me the first two states they're going to be looking at are Georgia and North Carolina. Polls close in Georgia at 7 p.m. Eastern. They close in North Carolina 7:30 p.m. Eastern time. Those two states will be the first bellwether they get to see how they're doing in these key battleground states. We'll send it back to you.
All right, Bill Melugin, thank you so much.
Thank you, Bill. Vice President Harris trying to close her campaign with optimism in PA, but her final stop in the must-win battleground state could be a sign of concern that she hasn't secured the support of the Democratic base. 5 stops, 1 day, yesterday, all in PA. Mark Meredith live in D.C. to take us through that. Mark, good morning to you.
Bill, good morning to you. We are awaiting the final security sweep here in Washington because the media and Harris supporters, they are going to be going onto campus here at Howard University for an election watch party. But the campaign admits, Bill, that this race is incredibly close, and it may be several days before a winner is declared. The vice president's team says they have multiple pathways to victory, still looking, of course, for that magic number you and Dana have been talking about, that 270. They say they are seeing strength in some of the Sunbelt states, places like North Carolina and Georgia, where they expect the results to come in fairly quickly to roll in tonight, not long after the polls close. Overnight, as you mentioned, Bill, Harris had her last rally in Philadelphia. She spoke only for about 19 minutes, and she largely stuck to her traditional stump speech, but she had plenty of celebrities on hand to generate some excitement, people like Lady Gaga, Oprah, Ricky Martin, and the vice president also referenced the historic nature of this short-lived campaign.
So, America, we started this campaign 107 days ago. And from the beginning, ours has not been a fight against something, it has been a fight for something. A fight for a future with freedom, with opportunity, and with dignity for all Americans.
Yes, the rallies are a big part of this, but the campaign says it's also been setting up the door-knocking operation in multiple states with more than 800,000 voters reached just in Pennsylvania alone. Speaking of door-knocking, last night the vice president did some of it herself, knocking on doors, reaching out to one homeowner who thought it was actually Governor Shapiro who was stopping by and appeared a little bit surprised by this. The vice president keeping a fairly light schedule here on Election Day. Bill, she is doing some radio interviews, I believe 7 of them in these battleground states, trying to encourage anybody during drive time to get out there and vote in this final stretch. Bill.
Thank you, Mark. Nice to see you, Mark Meredith, Washington, D.C. Thank you. Dana?
Jewish voters make up just 2% of the national electorate, and historically they lean toward Democrats. But in the key battleground states, even a small shift toward Trump could hand him the election. Let's bring in Jessica Tarloff. She's a co-host of The Five, and Josh Kroshar. He's editor-in-chief of Jewish Insider. I've been paying a lot of attention to this, and I keep asking. I know you know that because I keep bugging you about it. Call for number 1. This is Jewish registered voters, 2020 margin of victory. If you look at Arizona, Georgia, Nevada, Pennsylvania, they had an impact. But here's commentator Van Jones over at CNN on the Jewish vote in Pennsylvania. Watch.
The other thing that has me worried is that the Jewish vote in the suburban areas, Biden won the Jewish vote by 70%, 70-30 last time. Some polls show Kamala at 50-50. That is 70,000 votes we've bled away. That is the margin for victory.
Told you about that.
Well, look, there is a cohort of moderate-minded Jewish voters who have supported Democrats, usually vote Democratic, but they've been concerned about the lack of outspokenness from the vice president, speaking out against anti-Semitism and not being as full-throated as she possibly could be when it comes to the administration's support for Israel. Pennsylvania has one of the largest Jewish populations among all the battleground states on the map. There was a poll, I think, that was just referred to that showed Harris getting about 60%, 62% in the most recent poll of Jewish voters done by the Forward. Usually that number is in the 70s for Democrats. So in a close race, in a close state, that could make all the difference in the world.
Just to contribute to that, here is Rashida Tlaib on Friday. All right, Congresswoman out of Michigan. We had 100,000 uncommitted votes for Joe Biden back when he was on the ticket. That's what she said about that.
Don't underestimate the power you all have. More than those ads, those lawn signs, those billboards. You all have more power to turn out people that understand we got to fight back against corporate greed in our country.
I mean, well, that's not an endorsement, and I just wonder how it matters.
Well, she did organize the Get Out the Vote rally, so the expectation was that she wasn't going to be endorsing, but she is working very hard to elect Democrats from the top of the ballot down the ballot, for herself in particular. But Josh is completely correct. There are big concerns about turning out the Jewish vote. These moderate swing Jewish voters tend to be pro-choice, so that has been a big line of argumentation to them. And people who are out there canvassing and doing outreach have found 2 arguments are resonating the most in turning them towards Kamala if they are persuadable. One, J.D. Vance voting against aid for Israel in April, and then also asking the question, what is Donald Trump doing when he's courting Muslim voters in Dearborn, Michigan, for instance? Is his defense of Netanyahu as ironclad as you think it is, if he's out there trying to get these quote-unquote persuadables there that the Democratic Party has left behind?
All right, let me also ask you about this. This is call for number 5. This is Ashley Hayek. She's the executive director of America First Works, talking about Republican women and Trump.
I think the Republican women are the silent Trump voter. I think even the independent women, they may not want to, put that sticker on their car because they're supposed to be for a Harris candidacy. But when you're paying $8 for a gallon of orange juice and you can't pay for school supplies for your kids to go back to school, they're going to vote for Donald Trump.
Last week we were talking about how in some of the early vote, a lot of women had turned out to vote. But we don't know who they're voting for, or do we?
Well, look, the Harris campaign is betting on historic margins, not just good margins, but better than Biden in 2020 among women, especially among working class women in those 3 big Midwestern states. That's a tall task. There are a lot of women, like you heard just now, that are concerned about pocketbook issues. Abortion may not be the top issue, even though it's a factor, and they're undecided. They're decided in the final few weeks of this race. Donald Trump has made inroads with a lot of working class voters, particularly young men. To counteract that, Harris really just needs to run up the score in a way that is going to be challenging among women of all backgrounds.
Quick.
I expect that we will see a historic gender gap. I don't take anything for granted. There are definitely women who have been voting for Trump. In 2016, that was the surprise. 53% of white women voted for Donald Trump. The Harris campaign feels good about the margins that we are going to have tonight, though.
Okay, we'll see you together, right?
Yeah,
Nice.
exciting
Nice to
day.
have you.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
Thanks for all your
J&J.
time.
Yeah. Thank you.
Oh, J&J.
What's the issue you hear about the most at the doors?
Oh, probably the economy and immigration. Yeah, and I'm doing this all for my grandchildren, Gavin and Scarlett.
Gavin and Scarlett, they've got a good champion in her. Well, the polls are now open in nearly all 50 states. Americans making their voices heard in the voting booth in a historic election.
A lot to follow here, and we shall. Pennsylvania might be the biggest electoral prize today. The results, though, may be slow in coming in. So, closer look at counting the ballots in the Keystone State there, Dana.
And Harris and Trump enlisting star power for their closing arguments, and now it's in the hand of the voters. So how is the Trump camp feeling? Caroline Levitt is here. She joins us next.
It'll be a minute before everybody gets in. As we pan to the right, let's see how far it goes. How far does it go? 9:17 local time there in the Windy City. Wow, that's something. That is very impressive. Take a bow, Chicago. Well done. Back there in a moment to Dana now.
So we're going to be waiting to find out how those ballots turn out, right? So just to set your expectations for tonight, let's talk about the state deadlines for the ballots. So already processing right now some of the key battleground states we keep talking about. Arizona could be the longest. That could be the one we're waiting for. But Georgia expected to do pretty quickly. Michigan's a fast counter, I believe, Bill. North Carolina and Nevada should be coming in pretty reasonably. Now, in Pennsylvania, you'll recall we waited a long time on Pennsylvania before, but they started processing at 7 a.m. and the Secretary of State there says things are going to be better. Wisconsin is a key state, 10 electoral votes, and we're waiting to find out, of course, how that turns out. But when you're looking at this, just set your expectations because you're going to see some ebbs and flows. It might look like Harris is ahead or Trump is ahead, but we have to wait and see. Nationwide mail ballots, 67 million requested and 37 million returned. We'll see how that looks by the end of the night. Let's check in with Brian Yennes. He's in Bensalem, Pennsylvania with more. Hi, Brian.
Hi, Dana. Well, speaking of ebbs and flows, that's exactly what we're seeing here with voters coming in and out of this precinct in the all-important Bucks County, Philadelphia suburb. Some anecdotes. We spoke to one golf bro right before his tee time who said he and all of his buddies are going to vote for former President Trump. But then we also spoke to a son and his mother. They were split ticket Republicans who voted against former President Trump and against Dave McCormick, in part because they said McCormick isn't really from Pennsylvania. There were long lines this morning, 150 to 200 people. Here are some of those voters we spoke to earlier.
I like to be first, and President Trump has me very excited about the country, and I figure get here early.
I voted for Trump because I don't want the same 4 years that we had.
I'm voting for the vice president because she's going to make a difference in my life.
I'm going to go Trump because I want to make sure our country is strong. And, I mean, it's the only option because if we go the other way, then I don't even want to talk about what's going to happen.
Yeah, both campaigns spending a lot of time in Pennsylvania, particularly in the suburbs. They are now counting mail ballots. And what I mean by counting is really what I should be saying is processing. They're pre-canvassing. Right now, that is a live look at the warehouse in Philadelphia where they're going to be going through 195,000 mail ballots today. They have to open up 2 envelopes to get to that ballot using machines. They got to make sure that that ballot has a signature and a date. Then they take that ballot and put it through a machine. It's a lot of work, and they're doing that at the same time while they're also doing in-person voting. They do believe it will be quicker for 3 reasons. The better equipment than last time to cut through those envelopes. They have fewer mail ballots than in 2020, about 1 million less, and they have experience. They did this in 2020, did it in 22, and here we go again. So they're feeling optimistic that this won't last 4 days of counting like we saw in 2020. We shall see. But again, Dana, really interesting here in Bucks County. All eyes on PA.
Hey, you just used my favorite phrase of the day. We'll see. That's the one. Brian Yennes, thank you.
This election is a choice between whether we will have 4 more years of gross incompetence and failure or whether we will begin the 4 greatest years in the history of our country. This will be the golden age of America.
So the golden age, part of the final closing argument and appeal to voters. Donald Trump spent the final day in 3 different states. Ended up last night at midnight in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Vice President Harris focused solely on PA. 5 stops yesterday. Caroline Levis, the Trump-Vance campaign press secretary. Caroline, good morning to you. Thank you for your time. We just had Michael Tyler on from the Harris campaign about 30 minutes ago. Here's Nate Silver going into the week, I should say, said this.
Certainly, if I were a Democrat, I would go into the night saying, we have a 50-50 shot, right? If you want to tell yourself a story a little better than 50-50, I mean, I don't really think there's a basis for that. But we're going into the last week where if any candidate has a momentum, it's Harris and not Trump.
So that was a few days ago. Momentum can change. What Tyler said is that we're hitting our benchmarks in Pennsylvania. It's 10:22 on the East Coast. What are you seeing out there? What are you hearing?
Well, we're feeling great this morning, Bill. We have the hardest working candidate in politics. President Trump left it all on the field yesterday. 4 different stops campaigning from 9 in the morning to 2 a.m. this morning, landing in Florida at 6 a.m. So he left it all in the field with an optimistic message to the American people. Get out and vote. He's going to make this country affordable, safe, and strong again. And when we look at all the early voting trends and the trends we're seeing this morning, we are cautiously optimistic that President Trump is going to win tonight as long as people continue to get out and vote throughout the day. We know that our low propensity voters are turning out to the polls. And if you look at urban turnout, black voters and Latino voters, voter turnout for them is down. We know those are key demographics. Kamala Harris needs to win this election. So she has a lot more catching up to do than President Trump. That's how we feel this morning. We're feeling great.
Okay, Tyler also talked about the ground game. You know how much money the Harris team has. Can their ground game beat yours today? Simply.
Absolutely not. We have the best ground game in the business of politics. We have a data-driven, people-powered operation with hundreds of thousands of volunteers across the country who our campaign has been in touch with for months. We have Trump Force 47 captains, as we call them, who have been trained volunteers to focus on turning out low-propensity voters in their respective battleground states and counties. And we are counting on those Trump Force 47 captains to help us turn out the vote. And again, if you look at the early voting trend, we have been outpacing Democrats when it comes to the early vote. And we know President Trump's supporters and Republicans prefer to vote in person on Election Day. So as long as, again, everyone gets out and votes, we're confident we're going to have a victory tonight.
I got time for one more question. RFK Jr., he's on the ballot in Wisconsin and Michigan. He didn't want to be there, but he will be today. Roll this.
Should they still be voting for me? What about swing states? The answer is easy, no. No matter what state you live in, you should be voting for Donald Trump.
Okay, you get a tight race in Michigan or Wisconsin. If you do not win Pennsylvania, it could come down to those upper Midwest states. Does his name on the ballot make a difference?
Well, this morning we've been looking at Georgia and North Carolina. We expect those results to come in first. Then we'll turn our eyes to the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania tonight, where we're confident in our ground game. When it comes to the blue wall and RFK Jr.'s name on the ballot, he's made it very clear that he is on Team Trump. He and President Trump are going to help work together to make America healthy again. So anyone who supports RFK Jr. and his bold vision for this country, make sure you get out and cast your ballot for President Trump today. This election is a binary choice between President Trump and radical leftist Kamala Harris.
Just want to squeeze this in. If you're watching carefully in Georgia and North Carolina, what are you seeing there?
We're seeing that our people are turning out to the polls. Obviously, it's very early, but we're seeing low propensity voters are turning out. Urban turnout is down. Female turnout is down compared to 2020. That's something that a lot of people have been getting wrong. Kamala Harris has a lot of making up to do today. It's President Trump who's going to win tonight.
Okay, we shall see. Caroline, thank you for your time. Hearing from both sides this morning. Caroline Levitt, thank you.
Well, it's all about turnout today, but the weather could it get in the way? Your Election Day forecast is next. Plus, people are lining up in Georgia to cast their vote, but a new decision by the state Supreme Court could impact the count. Our Election Day coverage continues. She voted absentee, she voted by mail, and she said that her vote, she got a notice that her vote counted. She's very happy. But Colorado getting underway right now, Bill.
Okay, decent. So we know weather can play a role in this on the turnout anyway. What's on tap for today? Janice Dean's tracking that. Fox Weather Center now. JD, hello to you. What are you seeing out there?
Good morning, Bill and Dana. You know what? We had severe storms moving through the central U.S. We still have a cold front that's going to bring some rough weather from Texas to the Great Lakes, but we are concerned with the swing states. The weather in Michigan, we have rain in the forecast, unfortunately, throughout the day today. Temperatures are not too bad, and we don't think we see any snow in the forecast. But as we look ahead to Wisconsin, a lot of rain here and snow for the northern portion of Wisconsin. Of course, they're used to this kind of weather this time of year throughout the day today, but should not cause any problems on the roadways. And then Georgia looks really good for the most part. Temperatures in the low 70s, the mid 60s in some of the areas. Western North Carolina, that's where we could see the potential for some rain throughout the day for our friends in Asheville, the same areas that were hit hard by Helene. So we're watching North Carolina. Not too bad for Nevada. A little bit of cloud cover here for the western part of the state. And Arizona also looks pretty good. So the bottom line is we do have the potential for some rain, but nothing that should impact your vote or getting out there to vote. We'll keep you up to date. Over to you.
Thank you, Janice. Nice to see you. Thanks for doing our show, by the way.
Yeah, good to see you.
There she
Happy
is.
Election Day.
You got it. Thank you.
Well, the Georgia Supreme Court ruling that absentee ballots in Cobb County can only be counted if they arrive back at election officials by 7 p.m. tonight. The RNC had challenged a judge's order that extended the deadline, and the RNC tweeting, Election Day is not Election Day. Not the week after. Election Day is Election Day, not the week after. We will keep fighting, keep winning, and keep sharing up.
The deadline tonight, that was part of this group that had been overnighted. They're going to sequester them. They're going to put them aside and take a look at those.
And the question is whether or not they would count. I mean, Georgia redid their law, and they want to show America that they're doing it right. Meanwhile, if you want to add some of that, you can. Meanwhile, Wisconsin, you got this question about Milwaukee. Milwaukee, Fulton County, Philadelphia, they were the big, Detroit, they were the big four.
Right.
4 years ago that closed up shop and went home for the night. When a lot of others just stuck around and went ahead and added up the vote.
Get it done.
And I guess we'll find out tonight who's going to stick with it or not.
Well, it's very frustrating because it's deja vu all over again. We're talking about the same places, and the learning curve seems particularly long for some of these places, like Arizona. Why are we now again focused on Arizona and when they're going to be able to do this? You got Maricopa County saying it's going to take over 10 days potentially, and it's the same places. Now, we do have, I think, some overachievers. I think Georgia, Florida, Virginia, those are systems that have shown tremendous success so far. They're handling huge numbers. They've got new systems. They have good confidence. So it means that we're focusing on some of these usual places. And I wrote a column about a week ago saying, you know, we've been here before, and it would be really a good thing to do just two things. One is don't change the rules at the last minute. Mm-hmm. As Carrie was saying, hold the line on things like Georgia, which they did, and I think that was great. Pennsylvania Supreme Court issued an opinion along the same line saying we're not going to make changes this time. That's what undermined trust before. Mm-hmm. And the second thing is err on the side of access and transparency. Get the poll workers in there. Allow transparency. Yeah, you can withhold information after the election. It doesn't mean you have to, right? What really sort of fueled a lot of the distrust was the litigation that could have been avoided by people of good faith saying, let's share as much as we can.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So actually interesting to think about all these different states have all of these other rules, and that's one of the reasons the accusations of widespread nationwide fraud don't ever really hold a lot of water.
Right, because you have to look at each state individually to see what's actually happening. And, you know, the RNC, to add on to one of the professor's points just now, you know, why not, in the interest of transparency and in light of what happened in 2020, do everything you can to make sure that everything's out in the open, all is good. It really covers the officials more than anything else. And that's why the RNC filed this lawsuit in Milwaukee yesterday and saying, look, you know, poll observers should be allowed in. That's Wisconsin law. And here they go again, changing the rules at the last minute. They're arbitrarily saying that only, you know, one poll observer per party can be allowed in certain places. And they say the reason that matters is because how can two people see everything that's going on, you know, at the same time? It's not possible. And then when they ask the the local commission, well, can you at least tell us where only 2 people are allowed? They said, no, we can't do that. We can't, give you that kind of plan in advance. So that's a lawsuit that's happening.
Okay, you guys don't go far, okay? You're going to be on a leash, okay? Thank you, John.
Great to have you both.
Yeah, thank you, Carrie. I want to take you live now. This is Philadelphia, and we're watching right now where they are processing the ballots. Now, keep in mind now, you had, numbers off the top of my head, more than 800,000 Democratic ballots turned in at the close of business on Monday, and about 400,000 Republican ballots turned in. Check that. That was about 500,000. So Republicans have improved their margin in terms of registration in Pennsylvania statewide, where the Democrats have decreased their margin. So that may play a factor here. So what they're doing is they're processing the ballots, then they'll open them later. And then we'll start to get results that trickle out of the Keystone State. And then Dana's going to look at me around 1 o'clock in the morning and go, Hemmer, what is going on there again? So,
the secret.
What's that?
Got to stay hydrated.
Yes, you do.
But you have to have a balance because you might not be able to leave the set.
We shall.
This is the things we are working on, America.
So that's in Philly, and this was earlier today. Check it out, Battlegrounds. The East Coast here, Georgia's got a whole new way of doing things there. That law they signed in May, you're going to get a lot of red and blue on this map before the 8 Eastern hour. All right, they close at 7 o'clock. North Carolina closes at 7:30. We expect a faster count for North Carolina as well. We'll see some clues in a lot of the rural counties in Georgia and North Carolina to see whether or not Trump is holding on to the strength that he has shown in previous elections. The other thing I would think about right now is what happens in Pennsylvania when they close at 8 o'clock. It's a huge mail-in vote there, right? Could be a long delay. The processing started earlier today when the polls opened at 7 a.m. And you saw the margin of difference 4 years ago. Pennsylvania at 81,000 between Biden and Trump. Let's move back over here. 2 people who know this all too well, right? Kayleigh McEnany and Kevin McCarthy are here today. And good morning to both of you. Mr. Speaker, good morning. Yes. What are you looking at? What are you watching?
I'm watching Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is the entire country. If Trump wins Pennsylvania, he will become reelected as president. If we lose Pennsylvania, we're going to have a really hard time to win. And if you look at the last 4 years to today, we were behind by 1 million votes. Today, we're only behind 400,000 by early voting. That's a good sign for Trump. Philadelphia is where the Democrats bring their big turnout. We got to watch where that is, the rural vote, where it's coming in. For Congress, there's a number of seats I'll watch early in Pennsylvania, 7 and 8. I'll watch in Virginia, the 2 races. I'll watch Maine, if we pick that one up.
What about New York?
New York, I'm watching, can we defend? I think Lawler holds it on. There's 3 races in there, the Williams, D'Esposito, and Mark Monaro. Those are the tight ones I'm watching closely. Then you want to watch North Carolina 1, okay? Republicans going to add 3 already, but if we pick up the 1st district, and the turnout there, if you look in the polling, it looks like we're behind, but the black vote there is only 36%. If it stays low, we can win that seat. And if we win those, it's going to be a big night for Republicans. And it's tight right now, and I think the presidential will determine the House.
How important is it? It's interesting, Kayleigh. So if Harris wins and there's a Republican Senate, which is likely to happen, or if Trump wins, he has a Republican Senate but a Democratic House, are we looking at gridlock?
Yes, we are. Look, this is hugely important. Second to the presidential race, I am watching the Senate, and I'm watching it closely. For Republicans, think about it. You don't have the House, you have gridlock. But if you have the Senate, if, as we think will happen, Jim Justice prevails in West Virginia, if you pick up another like Montana, if you defeat John Tester, you get 51 votes. That means you're looking at judges and potentially justices. I know we still have the filibuster there. And then in the event of a Kamala Harris presidency, you have a bulwark, if you're a Republican, against the most radical elements of her agenda as they see it. So I would be watching very closely Bernie Moreno in Ohio. I'd be watching Michigan. There's a number of close races. And if you get to 50, 51, that's the magic number, and you're in good shape as a Republican. Even if you lose the presidency, at least you have that buffer.
Yeah, what do you think about 2 years ago when we were thinking, which led to your speakership, we were thinking that the Republican advantage was going to be greater than it actually was. So the red wave was not necessarily a red mirage, but it was more of a red ripple. Polling, they tell us that they've adjusted their ways, that they can compensate for the miss in 2016 of Trump voters and the miss in 2020 as Trump voters as well. What are you learning about that? You think that
I learned the pollings are never right. when election comes, you learn what was wrong in the polling. Like if we were looking here 4 years ago, the generic ballot was +6 for the Democrats. Today it's only 0.4 for Republicans, which makes the environment better. But they also said Biden was going to win Wisconsin by 6 points. They got Trump off by 4 points. He only won Wisconsin, Biden, by 20,000 votes. So there's an undercount somewhere. You don't know where the undercount is yet. That's the interesting part. Nate Cohen writes that white Republicans are 16% less likely to answer the phones in the poll. So is that in case? The election will determine that. And then we'll look back and say this was wrong about the polls and we rely too much on the polls. I look at where the ground is and I look where the environment is. You could have a great candidate, but timing is everything. I go back to the Gallup poll asking, do you identify with Republican or Democrat? For the first time in history, Republicans won that, 48-45. Generic ballot is better for us. So the climate is better. It's whether who gets the low propensity voters out. There is not an undecided voter in America. That's a myth.
Okay, let's get a final word from you, Kayleigh. What are you looking for tonight? Like what's like a key indicator for you?
A key indicator for me is I'm watching the vote totals as they rack up. I've been monitoring Philadelphia County, monitoring Pennsylvania, seeing if Virginia stays close. If Virginia stays close and isn't called early, that's a great sign for President Trump. Of course, Georgia's the first one that we'll watch when the polls close at 7. But I would just say this, if I'm President Trump, look, no one knows what's going to happen today, but I would feel very good. The fact that in Nevada and North Carolina, Republicans are marching in with an early vote lead, and adding to that, Arizona as well. This is a big deal. Republicans don't normally lead in the early vote. Anything can happen, but if I'm Trump, I'm loving Nate Cohn, what he said. There's no reason to believe pollsters fixed what went wrong in 2020. And what went wrong in 2020 was underestimating the strength of the Trump voter.
Wow.
Great to have
Good
you
stuff,
both.
guys.
Thank you so much. We'll see you tonight.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you.
Yes, see you tonight.
All right. And something we brought you earlier, podcast host Joe Rogan joins a team endorsing former President Harris took over the ticket. I want to take just a quick trip down memory lane with me, okay? June 27th is when Biden and Trump debated. And remember at 9:12, I set down my pen. I said, I don't need to take another note. This debate is over. Well, then July 1st, the Supreme Court granted Trump immunity for official acts as president. That caused Democrats to have a stir. There was an assassination attempt to remember. In Butler, Pennsylvania, against President Trump, he says, fight, 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 goes on to the convention. On July 21st, Joe Biden withdrew from the race and endorsed Kamala Harris. She takes over as the nominee. And you have, of course, this ongoing swirl of litigation that Trump is in. There was a Harris and Trump debate September 10th, consequential, and the second assassination attempt on President Trump's life while golfing in Florida. So we had all of that. And joining us now is Michael Tyler, communications director with the Harris-Walz campaign. Great to have you here. When you and I first met, you were the communications director for the Biden campaign. So that has changed. A lot of things have changed in the last 100 days. Take a listen to what some Democrats and some political analysts are saying about how they feel things are going for Harris right now.
What I'm worried about is you're counting on some women who are independent Republican women to come out and vote for Harris. Is that going to materialize?
Republicans do have an advantage in early vote numbers. When the early vote come in, it's going to look a little bit different than 2020, and that's scary.
My sense of the early vote is it is not as disastrous as it was in the first 3 days for the Democrats, but it's still really bad. And the Harris campaign has done a great job of spinning the national media on it.
I want to hear your points about early vote in Pennsylvania because Republicans have turned out. Are you confident that that is just a change in voting behavior, or is it a sign of a lack of enthusiasm for the Harris campaign?
Yeah, good morning. Happy Election Day. Thank you so much for having me. Listen, we feel good about what we're seeing in Pennsylvania and across the battleground states. I think when you look at the early vote data, yes, there has been a mode shift because Republicans, they used to disparage early voting and claim it was fraud. They've now embraced it and have encouraged their voters to do so. So you're seeing a little bit of a mode shift. But we are also hitting our benchmarks in states like Pennsylvania and across the country, where lower propensity Democratic target voters have been voting throughout their early vote period. But we're not resting on our laurels. polls, right? That's why over the weekend we were knocking on over 3 million doors across the battleground states, 1.5 million doors in Pennsylvania alone, 90,000 plus volunteers across the battleground states. And that is to hit our target voters, the voters who we know are going to be voting for Vice President Harris. But it's also an opportunity, a final opportunity for us to reach these late-breaking undecided voters who have been moving towards Vice President Harris by a double-digit margins because they've seen the split screen in front of them down the stretch of this campaign, where you have Vice President Harris pledging to be a president for all Americans, regardless of your party affiliation, so that we can bring people together to solve our common problems. And they've seen Donald Trump sort of spiral into the worst version of himself. Instead of offering people solutions down the stretch of this campaign, has spent his time lobbing insults and airing his personal grievances and making it clear that when he walks into the Oval Office, it's not going to be with a to-do list, as the vice president will, but it will be with his enemies list in hand, so consumed with his own grievances that he'll never offer solutions to the American people. And I think that's why you see so much increased energy and enthusiasm behind the vice president down the stretch here. Today is our final opportunity to make that case and make sure that we get over the hump to 270 electoral votes.
We have Caroline Levitt of the Trump campaign coming up soon. Since we only have about 20 seconds left, let me just ask you, where will you be watching tonight?
Yeah, listen, we'll be looking, of course, we have the 7 battleground states that are part of our path to victory.
Đi ngay mắt. Mắt thứ nhất. Mắt thứ hai. Sử dụng sợi màu xanh, móc phần mũ. Móc một đoạn bức xích. Bức xích thứ 5. Bức xích thứ 10. Bức xích thứ 15. 17 bức xích, quay lại móc vào chân thứ 3 tính từ kim móc. Một hàng mũi kép. Mũi kép thứ 4. Mũi kép thứ 8. Mũi kép thứ 12. Mũi kép thứ 15. Cắt bỏ dây thừa. Hàng mũi kép thứ 2. Mũi kẹp thứ 5. Mũi kẹp thứ 10. Mũi kẹp thứ 15. Năm mũi trượt. Hai mũi xích. 4 mũi kép. Móc tất cả các mũi giảm. Tất cả các mũi kép trụm đầu. Tiếp theo cắt sợi. Giấu sợi thừa. Sử dụng kim móc giấu sợi thừa phía đằng sau. Cắt bỏ sợi thừa. Đính thêm mũ.